Good day everyone! In this video, we are going to discuss the institutional history of schools, corporations, industries, religious groups, and the like. But first, let us find out the meaning of institutional history or IH. It is the narrative records of how an institution's ways and structures evolve through time. In this discussion, we will only focus on the following institutions, which are the education institutions and the religious institutions. The education institutions. During pre-colonial Philippines, in Visayan communities, the Babaylan served as educators. Babaylan refers to the pre-colonial Philippine tradition of female mystical healers whose spiritual connectedness was a source of political and social powers. They are Filipino shamans. Children also received their education from their parents on matters such as the household and hunting. The community's beliefs and traditions were passed down across generations. Epics are a long narrative poem in elevated style recounting the deeds of a legendary or historical hero. Some communities utilized a writing system known as baybayin, whose use was wide and varied, though there are other syllabaries used throughout the archipelago. Formal education was brought to the Philippines by the Spaniards, which was conducted mostly by the religious orders, although it remained exclusive to children of Spanish officers at first and then eventually to rich mestizos. These religious orders such as Franciscans, Dominicans, Augustinians, and Jesuits opened the first schools and universities as early as the 16th century. The Augustinians opened a parochial school in Cebu in 1565. The Franciscans took to the task of improving literacy in 1577 aside from the teaching of a new industrial and agricultural techniques. The Jesuits followed in 1581 as well as the Dominicans in 1587, setting up a school in Bataan. The church and the school cooperated to ensure that Christian villages had schools for students to attend. Schools for boys and girls were then opened. Colegios were opened for boys, ostensibly the equivalent to present-day senior high schools. The Universidad de Santiago, founded in Manila by the Jesuits in 1589, was the first colegio. Eventually, it was incorporated into the University of Santo Tomas College of Medicine in Pharmacology following the suppression of the Jesuits. Girls had two types of schools: the Beitirio, a school meant to prepare them for the convent, and another meant to prepare them for secular womanhood. The Law of Indies. Based on the order of King Philip II, Spanish conquistadors were to teach the native Spanish. However, given the reality of that time, this was not completely fulfilled. Education of natives was mostly ecumenical, and it involved the friars learning the indigenous languages and translating the prayers from Latin. From this reason, the Spanish language did not become as widespread as it did in South America. The Spanish also introduced printing presses to produce books in Spanish and Tagalog, sometimes using baybayin. Thomas Pinpin, who was a Tagalog printer working for the Dominican Press, wrote a book in Romanized phonetic script to teach the Tagalog the Spanish language. The book would be published in 160, the first such book published by a Philippine native. Some of the published books during the Spanish era are archived in the University of Santo Tomas. The Spanish government issued the Educational Decree of 1863, which required 2 schools per municipality, one for the boys and other for the girls, and standardized the curriculum. The decree also established the Superior Commission on Primary Education, which acted like today's Department of Education. The Educational Decree of 1863 provided a free public education system in the Philippines managed by the government. The decree mandated the establishment of at least one primary school for boys and one for girls in each town under the responsibility of the municipal government, and the establishment of a normal school for male teachers under the supervision of the Jesuits. Primary education was also declared free and available to every Filipino regardless of race or social class. Contrary to what the propaganda of the Spanish-American War tried to depict, they were not religious schools, rather, they are schools that were established, supported, and maintained by the Spanish government. After the implementation of the decree, the number of schools and students increased steadily. In 1866, the total population of the Philippines was 4,411,261. The total number of public schools for boys was 841, and the number of public schools for girls was 833. The total number of children attending those schools was 135,098 for boys and 95,260 for girls. In 1892, the number of schools had increased to 2,137, of which 1,087 were for boys and 1,050 for girls. By 1898, enrollment in schools at all levels exceeded 200,000 students. Among those who benefited from the free public education system were a burgeoning group of Filipino intellectuals, the Ilustrados or the Enlightened Ones, some of whom included Jose Rizal, Graciano Lopez Haina, Marcelo H. del Pilar, Mariano Ponce, and Antonio Luna, all of whom played vital roles in the propaganda movement that ultimately inspired the founding of the Katipunan. The following are the oldest higher education institutions established during the Spanish colonization era. Colegio de San Ignacio, first college schools for boys. The Colegio de San Ildefonso, established in Cebu in 1595. The Escuela Pia, renamed Ateneo Municipal, and then Ateneo de Manila University. The University of Santo Tomas, and the Colegio de Santa Potenciana, first school and college for girls. During the American period, the American used to introduce the American ideals and culture. The United States introduced the public school system, especially through 600 American teachers aboard by the USS Thomas in 1901. Known as the Thomasites, they would teach young Filipinos the English language and with it the American culture. Also, during the American period, children aged 7 and above were obliged to register at the nearest school. Education infrastructures established during the Spanish era were used again for the American school system. Levels of education were divided into elementary, secondary, and tertiary or college level. The following are the colleges built during the American period: the Philippine Normal School, St. Paul University, Zamboanga Normal School, University of Manila, Philippine Women's University, and the Far Eastern University. The Japanese occupation. The Japanese issued Military Order No. 2, which listed the basic guidelines of education for the reopening of schools, to enrich Filipino culture, recognize the Philippine-Japan relations by co-prosperity sphere, learn the Japanese language instead of English, and foster love of work. Education in the present time. The American system heavily influences Philippine education system with English as the main medium of instruction. The pattern of formal education has 4 stages: the preparatory and kindergarten, primary school or elementary, the secondary education or high school, and college. The House Bill 7350 or the American Calendar Shift of 2018 proposed a mandatory shift in the academic calendar, moving the start of the school year from June to August. The bill states that the shift of the start of the school year would help attain that goal by having the lessons and curriculum of our educational institutions aligned with that of foreign countries. It would then be easier for Filipino students to study abroad through student exchange programs and thus also make it easier for the graduates to land job opportunities abroad. Foreign faculty would also be able to share their knowledge and expertise here when the academic calendars are in sync, since scheduling wouldn't be an issue. Filipino teachers and professors would be able to do the same and could even bring them opportunities to teach overseas. If enacted into law, it would be a welcome change for parents who are protesting a memo from the Department of Education that all kindergarten student and grade 1 students be 5 and 6 years old respectively by August 31 to be able to enroll in public schools this school year. In 2013, President Benigno III signed into law the K-12 program. It was in 2013 when RA 10533 became a law. This law is known as the Enhanced Basic Education Act of 2013. It was popularly called K-12 because the Act RA 10533 enhanced the Philippine basic education system by strengthening its curriculum and increasing the number of years for basic education. Basic education in the Philippines before K-12 consists of 6 years of elementary education and 4 years of high school education. The Enhanced Basic Education Act of 2013, or K-12 as it is commonly known now, provides for a mandatory 1 year of kindergarten, 6 years of elementary, 4 years of junior high school, and 2 years of senior high school. The K-12 program applies to both public educational institutions and private educational institutions. The Enhanced Basic Education Act of 2013, or RA 10533, did not only lengthen the number of years of basic education but also provided that basic education may not only be delivered via regular schools but may likewise be delivered through the alternative learning system. Acceleration of students or learners in public and private basic educational institutions is still allowed in accordance with the Department of Education rules and regulations. The very goal of the K-12 program is to produce 21st century graduates equipped with the core values and lifelong competencies they need to contribute to societal development and nation building. The 2 additional years of senior high school will provide graduates with 4 exits and life options, namely employment, entrepreneurship, higher education, and middle-level skills development.
And now we are going to discuss about religious institutions. Religious institution means any church, temple, or building which is used primarily for religious worship and related religious activities. There are 2 types of religious groups. First, monotheistic. Religions that are based on a single deity, such as Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. They believe in the existence of one God. And the second one was polytheistic. Religions that has many deities, such as Hinduism, Shintoism, Buddhism, and Philippine pre-colonial beliefs. They believe in multiple deities. There are types of religious groups: the church, sect, and cult. First, church is a building used for Christian worship services and other Christian religious activities. Sect, a religious group that is a subset of a religion or denomination. Cult, it is a group or movement held together by a shared commitment to a charismatic leader or ideology, or social movement. The difference between church and sect. Church is an inclusive organization to which all kinds of people may belong, while the sect is an exclusive organization of religiously qualified people. Catholicism is an example of a denomination of the Christian religion. It shares some overarching beliefs with other Christian denominations, but has its own beliefs, traditions, and rituals as well. The following are the religious groups in the Philippines. First, Tagalog societies believed in Bathala, the one who created the earth and man and was superior to other gods, spirits, and creativity that guaranteed nature. Or, in short, Hari na Mahari. The second one was Visayan society believed in Babaylan, an indigenous Filipino religious leader who functions as a healer, a shaman, a seer, and a community miracle worker. From the word itself, babaylan, in Tagalog, babae lang. Men had to dress up as a woman in order to invoke the gods and proceed with the rituals. The Christianity and Islam. In 1350, Islam started spreading northward from Indonesia to the Philippines. Before Miguel Lopez de Legazpi arrived in 1565, Islam already firmly established in Mindanao and Sulu, with Islamic communities in Cebu and Manila. 16th century is when the Spanish arrived and started the Christianization in the Philippines. The Muslim in Mindanao and Sulu were not dominated or nangibabaw by the Spaniards who made trade treaties with them, So the Spanish crown assigned 5 religious orders to Christianize the natives. First, Augustinians. Second, Franciscans. Third, Jesuits. Fourth, Dominicans. And lastly, Recollects. Reducciones or reduction were measured by Bajo de la Campana or under the bell, which means rounding up the natives in settlements near the church for their conversion. Ito ay isang sistema ng panukala ng pamahalang Espanya noon kung saan ang mga Pilipino mula sa malalayong pamayanan ay sapilitang inililipat sa isang lugar upang pagsamasamahin. Maraming Pilipino ang tutol rito dahil naiiwan nila ang kanilang lupa at pananim, ngunit wala naman silang magawa. Inilipat sila sa kabisera para lagi nilang maalala ang pagsisimba. Although, according to the decree or order of the king, the bishop and the minister of the doctrina discharge the encomendero of many obligations, that if, when they are not present, the encomendero would have nevertheless, even when there are ministers of the gospel, the encomendero is obliged to gather in towns the Indians isolated in the mountains and the grasslands. Ang encomendero ay may karapatang mangolekta ng tributo o contribution ng mga taong pinagkatiwala sa kanya at ang tungkulin na tingnan ng kanilang karapatan, lalo na sa kanilang pagtuturo sa pananampalatayang Katoliko. Philippine Christianity is largely folk in nature, manifesting a mixed influence of Christian monotheism and indigenous animism. First, what is animism? Animism is the belief that objects, places, and creatures all possess a distinct spiritual essence. For example, a farmer may also seek religious blessings to prevent rice field destruction or before planting begins. There are also folk healers who use Roman Catholic symbols while performing their healing rituals. For example, albulario, a folk doctor commonly found in more rural areas of the Philippines, who heals people using herbs and traditional practices such as hilot or massage. During American period, Americans focused on strengthening mass education. Most of the Americans are teachers, however, Protestants. This resulted in a shift in the balance of Catholic influences, since Protestant groups controlled the system of public education in the country. Nakatuon ng mga Amerikano sa pagpapalakas ng edukasyong masa. Karamihan sa mga guro ay mga Protestante. Dahil dito ay nagbunga ito ng pagbabago sa balanse ng Katoliko, dahil kontrolado ng mga grupong Protestante ang sistema ng pampublikong edukasyon sa bansa. During the Philippine Revolution against Spain, the Catholic Church stood for the Spanish oppressors, and so revolutionaries like Apolinario Mabini recognized the importance of building a native church. George Aglipay was appointed to organize a nationalized church and thus become the first leader of the Iglesia Filipina Independiente, commonly known as Aglipayan. During the 20th century, 25% to 35% of the population was Aglipayan. In 1940, Felix Isagun Manalo founded the Iglesia ni Cristo or INC. He was said to be the restorer of Church of Christ and the God's last messenger. By the 2015, INC became the third largest religion in the Philippines. Aside from Iglesia ni Cristo, many religious groups were established through the time to challenge the supremacy of Catholic Church such as Seventh-day Adventists, Jehovah's Witnesses, and Rizalists who considered Noli Me Tangere as the Old Testament and El Filibusterismo as the New Testament. The summary of institutional history of schools, corporations, industries, religious groups, and the like. Institutional history is the narrative records of how an institution's ways and its structures evolved through time. During Spanish colonization, the educational system was formalized, although it remained exclusive to children of Spanish officers at first, then eventually to rich mestizos. The Spanish government issued the Educational Decree of 1863, which required two schools per municipality, one for boys and the other for girls, and it standardized the curriculum. The first 600 American teachers, called the Thomasites, who teach the young Filipinos the English language and with it the American culture. Before Miguel Lopez de Legazpi arrived in 1565, Islam already firmly established in Mindanao and Sulu, with Islamic communities in Cebu and Manila. Philippine Christianity is largely folk in nature, manifesting a mixed influence of Christian monotheism and indigenous animism. During the Philippine Revolution against Spain, the Catholic Church stood for the Spanish oppressors, and so revolutionaries like Apolinario Mabini recognized the importance of building a native church.